In 2025, more than 24 canned food products were urgently pulled from shelves across America after lab tests found hormone-disrupting chemicals, sky-high mercury, and sugar levels that rival soda, all hiding in the foods we feed our families every day. Some contained up to 3,000 parts per billion of endocrine-mimicking toxins, levels 300,000 times higher than what Europe now considers safe. Others were found to be laced with MSG under fake names or packed with seed oils linked to heart disease and cancers. And yet, many of these same cans are still quietly sitting on store shelves, waiting to be opened by seniors and struggling families trying to stretch a dollar. How did our food system sink this low? Why are the cheapest groceries often the most dangerous? And how many of us are unknowingly swallowing poison disguised as pantry staples? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. Today we're exposing the terrifying reality behind 8 extremely toxic canned foods that could be harming you more than you realize, and we'll reveal the safer alternatives hiding in plain sight. Number 1. Tomato sauces. If you thought tomato sauce was just a cheap, harmless shortcut to stretch a meal on a fixed income, brace yourself, because in 2025, what's bubbling inside those cans is far more sinister than overcooked pasta. Earlier this year, several major brands of canned tomato sauces and crushed tomatoes, including batches sold nationwide at Walmart, Target, and Dollar General, were abruptly yanked from shelves after European regulators flagged sky-high levels of endocrine-disrupting chemicals. These weren't small recalls tucked away on page 12 of a newspaper. They were sprawling Class 1 alerts, the most severe category, issued because exposure may cause serious adverse health consequences or death. Yet most Americans never even heard about them. Why? Because unlike Europe, where authorities demanded immediate action, U.S. regulators downplayed the danger, even as the same cans sat in pantries across the country, leaching chemicals into dinner plates. The rot starts with how these sauces are made. A single half-cup serving can contain 8 to 12 grams of added sugar, spiked with citric acid and salt, a chemical cocktail disguised as homemade flavor. That sweetness isn't grandma's recipe. It's corporate sleight of hand meant to mask the intense acidity that silently eats away at the can's protective lining. And once that lining is breached, it's open season for BPA, a notorious endocrine disruptor that mimics estrogen and scrambles hormones even at microscopic levels. Here's the punchline. After public outrage over BPA, companies didn't stop using endocrine-active chemicals. They just swapped BPA for BPS and BPF, its nearly identical chemical cousins, and slapped on a smug BPA-free label. It's like switching out a wolf for 2 coyotes and calling the pasture safe. Europe has seen enough of this. Their food safety agencies are slashing acceptable limits to a near-zero threshold of 0.0101 parts per billion, a de facto ban. Meanwhile, in the United States, the FDA still blesses levels as high as 3,000 parts per billion. That's not a rounding error. That's up to 300,000 times higher than what European scientists believe is safe. Imagine telling firefighters a house is under control while it's still engulfed in flames. That's the scale of regulatory denial we're living with. And while bureaucrats debate decimal points, the fallout lands hardest on the elderly, veterans, and low-income families who rely on these cheap staples. Endocrine disruptors have been tied to thyroid disorders, reproductive problems, obesity, and cancers. Diseases that quietly drain savings, wreck health, and rob families of years they can't afford to lose. Even the so-called safer options, plain crushed tomatoes, often contain added salt and citric acid, accelerating the very chemical leaching that regulators refuse to acknowledge. And don't think glass jars are a solution readily available on a tight budget. While glass is cheap and recyclable, big food companies deliberately limit production so they can charge $5 or $6 per jar, while the canned version still goes for $1.50. That's not economics. That's engineered scarcity, a cynical way to turn basic safety into a luxury. It's the same tactic oil companies use when they choke supply to inflate prices. If you control the scarcity, you control the choices. But here's the bitterest irony. The solutions are painfully simple. Fresh tomatoes, boiled, blanched, or frozen, bypass the chemical roulette entirely. Storing leftovers in the freezer or blending them before freezing gives you homemade sauce on demand without the endocrine side dish. And for those who can, glass-jarred brands like Moody, Bio Naturae, or Rao's Homemade offer safer alternatives that don't come with a toxic footnote. The more we demand them, the more pressure we put on corporations to make safety the norm rather than a premium. Because until that happens, every time you twist open a can of tomato sauce, you're not just feeding your family, you might also be feeding a system that values profit over public health. Number 2, canned beans. It's a cruel twist of irony that a food once marketed as heart-healthy is now the subject of urgent safety warnings. In 2025, several popular canned bean products, including multiple batches of baked beans and mixed beans sold under major supermarket labels, were pulled from shelves across the United States and Canada after consumer watchdogs and independent labs flagged dangerously high levels of BPA and its chemical cousins. This was not a quiet recall. It came with mounting evidence linking these pantry staples to hormone disruption, metabolic disorders, and increased cancer risk. Yet most Americans never saw the headlines, and the cans kept showing up in dollar store aisles and food bank donations. A toxic Trojan horse hiding in plain sight. What makes the betrayal sting even more is that the damage doesn't stop at chemicals. A single half-cup serving of some baked bean brands contains up to 18 grams of sugar, ounce for ounce, sweeter than Coca-Cola, along with artificial flavors, seed oils, and acidic preservatives that intensify BPA leaching. But the problem goes deeper than the ingredient list. Anytime food sits in a liquid-filled can, and beans almost always do, essential minerals like potassium and magnesium don't stay where they belong. They migrate from the beans into the surrounding liquid, dispersing evenly. When consumers, following decades of drain and rinse advice, pour that liquid down the sink, they're also dumping a significant portion of the very nutrients they were promised. The result is a cruel bait and switch. What started as a nutrient-rich food is reduced to a sugary, chemically tainted, nutritionally hollow version of itself by the time it hits your plate. And because these cans also contain acid and salt, the corrosion of the internal lining accelerates, releasing more endocrine disruptors into every spoonful. Regulators in Europe have sounded the alarm, calling for stricter limits and consumer warnings. But American agencies remain stuck in the past, clinging to outdated safety thresholds and letting the industry police itself. Meanwhile, low-income seniors and working-class families continue to rely on these products, unknowingly paying for convenience with their health. It's a system designed to trap people in a cycle. Cheap food today, expensive medical bills tomorrow. And the cruelest part? It doesn't have to be this way. There are safer alternatives, but they are deliberately buried under the noise. Plain canned beans, like black beans or pinto beans without added salt or preservatives, are far less acidic and leach significantly less BPA. Even better, one company, Eden Foods, has spent years researching how to eliminate toxic linings altogether. They revived the use of oleoresin, a vegetable-based extract once widely used before BPA dominated the market. Eden specially orders oleoresin-lined cans, which cost more but contain no BPA at all. Their plain canned beans are among the few on US shelves that don't carry a chemical warning label disguised as a barcode. For tomatoes, Eden bypasses the problem entirely by using glass jars, since oleoresin cannot withstand the acidity of tomatoes. A quiet demonstration that safer solutions exist when profit isn't the only goal. For those trying to escape the chemical trap, dried beans cooked at home remain the gold standard, free from hidden sugar, synthetic oils, and endocrine disruptors. And if convenience is non-negotiable, seek out safer brands like Westbury Natural, Pacific Foods, or Biona Organic, which are beginning to follow Eden's lead. The truth is simple but unsettling. Those 99-cent cans that promise fiber and protein may also be delivering hormone chaos and nutrient theft. Until regulators close the loopholes and corporations stop cutting corners, every spoonful of canned beans will carry a bitter aftertaste. The taste of trust betrayed and health quietly stolen. Number 3, canned fruit. For decades, we've been told that fruit and vegetables are good for you. A phrase repeated so often it feels like gospel. But here's the gut punch nobody wants to say out loud. Canned fruit is not the same food as fresh fruit. It's a Frankenstein version, stripped of nearly everything that made the original healthy. Vitamin C? Practically zero. Other vital nutrients? Gone. Even the minerals that fresh fruit naturally contains migrate into the syrup inside the can, meaning the only way to get them is to drink that sticky liquid too. And that's where the real nightmare begins. Depending on the syrup used, a half-cup serving, barely enough to cover the bottom of a bowl, can carry between 25 and 30 grams of sugar in heavy syrup, 15 to 20 in light syrup, and 11 to 16 even in so-called natural juice. That own juice label is corporate wordplay. In reality, manufacturers often concentrate juice from the same fruit, spike it for sweetness, and pour it back in. And no one eats just half a cup. Most people eat half a can, which means swallowing 45 to 50 grams of sugar in heavy syrup. More than many candy bars. Even worse, biochemically, sugar from fruit syrup is identical to table sugar. Your pancreas doesn't care if it came from a peach or a soda bottle. It spikes your blood sugar, triggers insulin surges, and sets the stage for metabolic chaos either way. A single can of soda contains around 35 to 40 grams of sugar. Half a can of canned fruit can easily surpass that. And while soda companies at least admit they're selling sugar water, canned fruit hides behind the halo of healthy produce, betraying consumers who are trying to make better choices. For seniors on fixed incomes, that betrayal cuts deep. What's marketed as a wholesome dessert or breakfast side is, in reality, a sugar bomb dressed up as nutrition. One that can push blood sugar into dangerous territory and fuel conditions like type 2 diabetes. It's not just the sugar that makes canned fruit a ticking time bomb. The syrup's acidity, combined with the fruit's natural acids, corrodes the BPA-based lining of the can. Once breached, endocrine-disrupting chemicals leach into the syrup, turning a supposed vitamin boost into a hormone-altering hazard. And when you throw in the fact that canned fruit has virtually no fiber, the very thing that slows sugar absorption, the comparison to soda becomes even more damning. A cup of fresh raspberries, for example, contains only about 5 grams of sugar, but 7 to 8 grams of fiber, which blunts sugar spikes and nourishes the gut. Canned fruit offers none of that balance, just an insulin roller coaster and a chemical side dish. The simplest fix is also the oldest wisdom. Eat fruit as nature intended. Buy fresh, in-season produce when possible, or choose frozen fruit with no added syrup, which retains most of its nutrients without the chemical baggage. If convenience is key, brands like Thrive Market, Cascadian Farm, and Wyman's sell frozen or glass-jarred fruit without hormone-disrupting linings or sugar baths. It's a small change with enormous impact. One that can protect your blood sugar, your hormones, and your trust in what's supposed to be healthy. Because as long as canned fruit hides behind its undeserved halo, it remains one of the most deceptive products in the grocery aisle. Number 4, canned soup. If canned soup once felt like a warm hug on a cold night, the truth behind the label is closer to a chemical ambush hiding in your pantry. In 2025, several major soup brands, including household names found in Walmart, Kroger, and Costco, were forced into nationwide recalls after independent lab tests found concerning levels of MSG analogs, chemical thickeners, and dangerously high sodium content. These recalls came amid mounting scrutiny over the fact that canned soups have quietly transformed from simple comfort food into industrial science projects in disguise. Open one of those hearty cans and you're not just getting soup. You're getting a stew of sugar, seed oils, emulsifiers, and additives that your grandmother wouldn't even recognize as food. MSG, which consumers have learned to avoid, now hides behind a glossary of pseudonyms like hydrolyzed protein and yeast extract. There are more than 50 such euphemisms, each designed to fool the watchful eye and sneak into your bowl anyway. But the salt is where things turn truly alarming. A single small can of soup can contain around 2,500 milligrams of sodium, roughly the entire recommended daily intake. Yet it comes almost entirely without the balancing electrolytes your body needs. Sodium on its own isn't inherently evil, but when it storms the bloodstream without potassium, magnesium, or calcium to counterbalance it, it becomes a stress test for your kidneys. It's like trying to run a marathon with one leg tied. The system can function, but it's straining, depleting vital minerals along the way. Over time, that imbalance contributes to hypertension, kidney strain, fluid retention, and cardiovascular risk, a devastating blow for seniors already grappling with fragile health. The problem isn't just physiological, it's systemic. These soups are engineered to taste addictive and cost pennies, trapping low-income families and retirees into choosing them over fresh alternatives. And when those cans are filled with acidic broths and salt-heavy liquids, they accelerate the corrosion of BPA linings, adding endocrine disruptors to an already toxic mix. Yet corporate marketing still paints canned soup as wholesome, leaning on nostalgia and convenience to sell what is, in many cases, little more than liquid junk food. Even the recent recalls, triggered by undeclared MSG and unapproved additives, barely made headlines, overshadowed by slick advertising campaigns and comforting slogans. There are ways to fight back without giving up soup altogether. Homemade soups made from fresh vegetables, beans, and herbs give you control over salt, sugar, and additives. And they naturally deliver the potassium and magnesium that your kidneys crave. If canned convenience is non-negotiable, pair those soups with mineral-rich sides like avocado, cauliflower, or pumpkin seeds to help restore electrolyte balance. And look for brands stepping away from chemical shortcuts, like Pacific Foods, Amy's Kitchen, and Imagine Foods, which avoid MSG analogs and keep sodium levels far lower than the industry norm. Because at the end of the day, soup should nourish, not sabotage, your health. Until regulators stop allowing the industry to disguise chemicals as comfort, every spoonful from a can is a gamble that too often ends with your kidneys paying the price. Number 5. Tuna in vegetable oil. Tuna used to be the symbol of cheap protein, the little silver can that stretched paychecks and filled lunchboxes. But in 2025, it's also one of the most quietly dangerous items in the canned food aisle. Multiple batches of canned tuna sold in major U.S. retailers were recently recalled after tests revealed mercury levels far exceeding what regulators consider safe, with some cans containing several times the amount allowed in Europe. Mercury isn't just a buzzword. It's a neurotoxin that can damage the brain, kidneys, and nervous system, particularly in older adults whose bodies can't detoxify as efficiently. And here's the catch. Most of the cans pulled from shelves weren't the premium brands. They were the bargain bin varieties most often purchased by retirees and working-class families. It's a bitter twist of fate. The very people trying to save money are the ones most likely to pay for it later with their health. The trouble doesn't end with mercury. Nearly all canned tuna packed in vegetable oil uses soybean or canola oil, cheap industrial byproducts often derived from genetically modified crops. These oils are highly inflammatory, linked to cardiovascular issues, and when combined with tuna's natural fats, they can degrade the quality of omega-3s that make fish beneficial in the first place. Most people instinctively drain the oil before eating, and they should, because consuming that sludge is like seasoning your heart with a slow fuse. But here's the cruel paradox. When you pour the oil down the drain, you're also discarding a significant portion of the omega-3 fatty acids, the very nutrients that make tuna worth eating. What remains is a product that's lost both its health halo and its nutritional edge, leaving you with a salty, mercury-laced compromise masquerading as a healthy choice. And salt is no small footnote here. Many canned tuna products are loaded with sodium, again without potassium, magnesium, or calcium to balance it. That imbalance strains the kidneys, spikes blood pressure, and contributes to long-term cardiovascular damage. It's like turning your bloodstream into a seesaw with one side nailed to the ground. The whole system struggles to stay stable, yet regulators continue to look the other way, and manufacturers double down on low-cost vegetable oils and high-salt formulas because they're cheap, shelf-stable, and profitable. Once again, the financial bottom line wins, while public health loses. If you're going to eat canned tuna, the solution isn't to swear it off forever. It's to choose smarter. Look for varieties packed in water or extra virgin olive oil, and consume the liquid instead of draining it to retain the precious omega-3s. Certified low mercury or mercury-free options are increasingly available, though they're often tucked away on the higher shelves where bargain hunters rarely look. Better yet, swap tuna for sardines or mackerel, smaller fish with lower mercury levels and higher omega-3 content. Brands like Safe Catch, Wild Planet, and Ortiz offer tuna that's rigorously tested for mercury and packed without inflammatory seed oils. Because in the end, the cheap can of tuna isn't really cheap if it costs you your heart, your kidneys, or your peace of mind, and no amount of mayonnaise can cover up that kind of damage. Number 6. Canned pasta meals. If there's one item that proves convenience can come at a steep cost, it's canned pasta meals. The SpaghettiOs, ravioli, and lasagna in a can that many Americans grew up with. Once sold as cheap, kid-friendly comfort food, they're now under scrutiny after multiple recalls in 2025 revealed contamination with undeclared additives and dangerously high sodium levels. Peel back the label, and you'll find a chemical soup dressed up as dinner. Refined white flour stripped of nutrients, sugary sauces loaded with seed oils, and meat so low-grade it's barely recognizable as protein. Many of these meals rely on modified food starch, artificial flavorings, stabilizers, and preservatives. A cocktail designed to survive years on a shelf rather than nourish a human body. The sodium content is staggering, often more than half of the daily recommended intake in a single can. Yet it comes without the balancing minerals like potassium and magnesium. That imbalance strains the kidneys, spikes blood pressure, and sabotages heart health, especially for seniors. And because the sauces are highly acidic, they accelerate the breakdown of BPA linings, leaching hormone-disrupting chemicals into the meal. It's a cruel irony. A product marketed as hearty and wholesome can end up draining your health one spoonful at a time. The solution is to reclaim control over what goes into your pasta. Fresh whole-grain noodles, homemade sauces, and quality proteins not only reduce chemical exposure, but also deliver real nutrition. If you still want convenience, brands like Cucina Antica, Muir Glen, and Amy's Organic offer jarred or frozen pasta meals without the toxic additives. Because no nostalgia is worth trading your heart and kidneys for a can of factory-made sludge. Number 7. Canned meat dishes. Few canned foods embody everything wrong with the industry quite like canned meat meals, especially Vienna sausages, meat stews, and canned chili. These products, many of which were caught up in high-profile recalls in 2025 due to contamination and mislabeling, are often little more than a dumping ground for the cheapest scraps processors can find. Forget premium cuts. What's inside is usually pink slime and pulverized leftovers bound together with sugar, seed oils, MSG, and textured vegetable protein. Even the labels bragging about specially selected ingredients are telling the truth in their own twisted way. The ingredients are specifically selected to be as cheap as possible. The nutritional profile is just as bleak. These meat dishes are sodium bombs with virtually no potassium, magnesium, or calcium to balance them. That imbalance strains the kidneys, raises blood pressure, and increases cardiovascular risks, especially in older adults. Many cans also contain soy protein concentrate and chemical fillers that mimic the texture of real meat while delivering none of its nutrients. The result is a Frankenstein stew that's more science experiment than supper, but it's sold as hearty and protein-rich to those who can least afford the long-term health consequences. There's a better path, and it starts in your own kitchen. Homemade chili made with grass-fed beef, plain canned or pressure-cooked beans, and fresh vegetables transforms a chemical-laden product into real food. Even if canned options are unavoidable, sticking to Ply canned tomatoes and plain beans drastically reduces your exposure to additives. Brands like Wild Zora, Yoder's, and Better Than Bouillon offer shelf-stable meat products with far fewer synthetic ingredients. Because in the end, your heart, kidneys, and arteries deserve better than a can full of industrial leftovers disguised as dinner. Number 8. Canned fish. Canned fish should be one of the healthiest staples in your pantry. Rich in omega-3s, packed with protein, and a heart-friendly alternative to processed meats. But in 2025, several canned fish products, including sardines and mackerel and sauce, were swept into recalls after lab tests found high levels of MSG, seed oils, and chemical additives not listed on the label. What starts out as real food from the ocean often ends up drowning in sugary, salt-heavy sauces that transform a nutritional powerhouse into a metabolic landmine. Those sauces aren't just flavor, they're a chemical disguise. Ingredients like sugar, modified starches, and cheap vegetable oils are routinely added to boost shelf life and mask poor quality, while sodium levels soar without potassium or magnesium to keep the body's electrolytes balanced. The tragedy is that sardines and mackerel themselves are excellent choices, low in mercury and naturally rich in healthy fats. But once doused in industrial sauces, their benefits are sabotaged. It's like taking a perfectly good classic car and pouring motor oil into the gas tank. The potential is still there, but it's rendered useless. For older adults managing blood pressure or metabolic health, these doctored fish products can quietly worsen the very conditions they're trying to avoid. The fix is simple but vital. Skip the sauce. Choose canned fish packed in water or extra virgin olive oil, where the natural nutrients remain intact and the sodium stays manageable. Brands like King Oscar, Matiz, and Wild Planet offer clean, minimally processed options that preserve what makes canned fish valuable in the first place. Because the ocean already did the hard work. It's the factory shortcuts that ruin it. Your health is worth more than corporate profit. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and subscribe for more truths they don't want revealed.
Thank you for watching today's video all the way through. If you found the content helpful, don't forget to click like and subscribe to stay updated to our latest daily videos. Now feel free to check out other feature videos currently shown on your screen. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.